everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our panel discussion here today, Career Options Beyond Faculty Positions in Academia. Today's discussion is focused on the humanities and social sciences, so we're really glad that you're here. Today is going to be pretty informal in terms of conversation with the panelists, an opportunity to get some great insights from folks who have wonderful experiences. So probably wrap up the formal panel discussion about 4:45, so there'll be some time for one-on-one questions at the end. I did see in the registration some very individual questions that might be more suited to that networking time at the end today. So let me welcome you. My name is Melissa Bostrom. I'm the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development in the Graduate School. I'm delighted to be co-sponsoring today's panel discussion with my colleagues in the Career Center, and Dr. Paul Maselli, Assistant Director for Graduate Student Career Services, is here with us today, and with the Office for Postdoctoral Services, and David Steinbrenner from the Office of Postdoctoral Services is here today, video recording the session for those who couldn't be with us. Let me take a brief moment to introduce our panelists and just a tiny bit of their background, and then I'm going to ask them to tell you a little bit more about themselves before we launch into the formal panel discussion of this informal panel discussion. So, sitting immediately to my right is Dr. Heidi Madden. She is Librarian for Western European Studies and Adjunct Assistant Professor of Germanic Languages and Literatures here at Duke University. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Tübingen, her master's and PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in comparative literature, and her MLS from North Carolina Central University. To Dr. Madden's right is Dr. Alan Kendrick. Alan is Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Development in the Graduate School and my colleague there. He holds a bachelor's degree in International Studies in Spanish from Emory University, a master's degree in Foreign Affairs from the University of Virginia, and a PhD in Government from the University of Virginia. To Dr. Kendrick's right is Dr. Christian Ferney. He is currently Student Programs Manager at the Kenan Institute for Ethics. He holds a bachelor's degree in Sociology from Linfield College, and he earned his master's and PhD in Sociology from Duke University. And finally, Dr. Margaret Lou Brown. She is Senior Research Scholar and Director of Programs at the Forum for Scholars and Publics here at Duke. She holds a bachelor's degree in Anthropology from Wake Forest University and earned her PhD in Sociocultural Anthropology from Washington University in St. Louis. So to get us started with conversation today, I'm going to ask, starting with Dr. Madden to my right, to give us just a 2-minute overview of your career path that's gotten you to where you are before we start with our questions.
All right, so I got an undergraduate degree in Germany, and I had libraries in mind at the time, but in Germany we have a system where you decide right from the beginning whether you're going to be a specialized librarian or library director or administrative person, or whether you're doing libraries as a hands-on cataloging and document preservation and things like that. So I wanted a PhD and wanted to be bilingual simply because that was the path to German librarianship. And then I came to this country for a PhD and really enjoyed foreign language teaching. I still teach a course every now and then in the German department. But then sort of, for me, the librarianship evolved naturally from getting a PhD.
She's very good. I was going to say, wow, in 2 minutes, my story takes forever. So I'll try to sum it up. Just kind of going back and refreshing with Melissa, my background, you can see that I'm a political scientist by training. I had in mind at some point in graduate school that I was going to be a foreign service officer of some sort, but by hook or crook, I wound up in higher education administration. To make a long story short, I started my career as an assistant professor at a small liberal arts college and was made chair of a small department and enjoyed the administrative work, but knew that that might have been a death knell pre-tenure. So I made up my mind in my 4th year of teaching that I would try to stay in academia, combine the work that I was doing with students. I loved teaching, I loved research, but was willing to jumpstart and do something different. From there, wound up as the director of diversity at one of our competitor institutions, and from there was lured here to become, to do recruitment and retention and whatnot. So under 2 minutes, that's it. But I will encourage you today to, all of you, since it's just a small group, let's do lunch at some point, and I can bore you with my interest in Black electoral behavior within the African diaspora and how that relates to, I'll wake you up in the middle of it, of course, but how that relates to today.
I guess I'd say my decision to go into this kind of non-academic academic work was made for me by the job market to a large extent. I got my PhD in 2009. It was not a really good year to be getting your PhD. I had a close colleague who graduated a year ahead of me, got 3 job offers with essentially the same CV. It wasn't happening for me, and so I did a little journeyman teaching for a while, and then when through my supervisor network, when the opportunity came up to take a job at the Kenan Institute for Ethics, where I still work, I took that, and I've kind of moved up within the institute to what I do now. The short version.
So I guess a life in education, so part of it's comfort with the university rhythm and that sort of thing that probably keeps me in this setting. I started after graduate school in a tenure track position, and similar to Alan, about my 4th year, post-child, post some family issues, I decided this really wasn't the life I wanted. I didn't want the tenured faculty life. I'm more of an interdisciplinary person than I am a disciplinary person, and found at WashU that there were some other opportunities that opened up to me once I decided to take a different path. So I worked in an interdisciplinary program in American Culture Studies as academic coordinator. I managed the graduate program, the Graduate Seminar in the Center for New Institutional Social Sciences. And then when our family got an opportunity to move back to North Carolina, where I grew up, I started working at Duke, first with the certificate program in politics, philosophy, and economics, then at the Kenan Institute for Ethics, with Christian as the education and outreach manager, and now with this program in the whatever we're called, the Forum for Scholars and Publics. We're new, so that's just sort of where I've been, what I've done, and I can, along the way in answering some of these other questions, I can talk about why some of those decisions were made.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to start with Lou for this next question. I'm going to jump to question number 2, panelists, because I think we already addressed them in question number 1 in your summaries. The question was, why did you decide to pursue a career beyond the traditional tenure track faculty position? And I think everybody kind of touched on the why. So I'm going to ask each panelist to kind of describe a typical day or week in your job, knowing that usually in these kinds of jobs there is no typical day or week. But tell us about some of the responsibilities that are involved in your job.
Okay, so I get to start this. So it depends on the day, which is one of the reasons that I really like this job, is that there's a lot of variety in what I do, and I think probably for all of us that's what we'd say. So my typical day, it does involve a lot more email than I would like, and that's one of the things I'm trying to figure out how to stop, is that constant barrage of email that allows you never to move from your computer screen. But in between, a lot of that email is doing some of the things about my job that I like, which is matchmaking is one of the things that I think that I do. I work with faculty. I try to partner up faculty and other people around the community to develop panels or programs, thinking about who would work well together to discuss a particular issue, trying to look for the unexpected. So looking around the university, introducing myself to people, introducing the program to people, introducing them to each other. And with this particular program, I'm out in Durham a bit more, so learning about venues in Durham to hold events and types of things that we might do with partners in Durham, and that's been a fun addition to what I do. Some of it's budget management. That is my least favorite part of the job, and that's the thing that I put off until I don't have any opportunity to put it off anymore. But let's see. So I guess those, and then it's things like catering and managing, organizing a hotel or a flight for somebody. So sometimes it's 50 emails with one person just about what is a panel discussion going to be out, what's going to happen at this event, or emailing faculty and saying, do you want to attend? Would your students be interested in this? How could we tweak it so it would be more interesting to you? So a lot of it is really developing relationships and then cultivating ideas through those relationships.
Go down the line. Okay. So I'm going to echo what Lou said about variety being one of the nice things about the kind of work that I do. It does make it a little hard to summarize. So in a typical week, I'm probably meeting with a graduate arts fellow about a show that may be going up in the gallery that's outside my office that I generally manage. Essentially what I do is all of the, or most of the co-curricular programming at the Institute, which is anything that doesn't take place in a classroom for credit. And so it's a lot of working with students to develop programs or events that they want to run and making their ideas better than they might be by themselves. It's a lot of meeting with students. It's a lot of, and that's a combination of, well, tell me what you want to do and what does that mean, and also how's your life and what are you thinking your career path is today. There is a fair amount of management in my life at the moment. I supervise 2 full-time staff and about 25 students, so that takes up quite a bit of my time. And I teach a course in the fall, so there's a little course prep in there as well. So that's probably.
Wow, typical week. In all fairness, I was thinking of the question. I said, well, let me tell you what I did today. So this morning we started with getting a call from a colleague who says, oh my goodness, we've got faculty coming and we don't have any way to kind of give them, to tell them thank you. Do you mind dropping by the bookstore and picking up those nice grad school mugs that you've probably seen that are for sale now? They're beautiful, by the way. You should all have one. And then, of course, moving from there to the actual meeting today, which was to finalize the nominations for the Dean's Graduate Fellows, your peers who are prospective graduate students who are trying to be you at this particular time. From that, kind of going back and forth to say, okay, now the dean's got to make her decisions. Have we given her enough information to do this? Then a little downtime, then coming here to be on the panel with you. In about 2 weeks, I will be in San Antonio, Texas, actually working, but maybe on the Riverwalk. If you happen to be there and see me, just keep passing. Duke has actually joined, Duke is a part of several consortia, and I travel for Duke about 25% of the time. So that is a part of this job that I do like. In graduate school, U.S. diplomacy wasn't what I thought it was going to be. However, this side of diplomacy that I see and my outreach and looking for students is really the task that I think I was prepared for and what I wanted to do. It was not about, when an Arab gives the U.S. a Buick, what is the protocol? I haven't had anything that big to deal with, but anyway. So one of the things, as the panelists as my 2 colleagues have told you, there isn't a typical day with these particular jobs. One of the questions that I like is, are these jobs stable? And I laughed as I said, I guess what we did give up was tenure. But I think there is something there because you have to kind of recreate and reinvent yourself, which I think keeps you on your toes. So if you're willing to do that, I think the rewards can be great.
So librarianship is also one of those jobs that can include a lot of different kinds of work. So mainly I manage budgets. I manage acquisitions from Europe and from the US about Europe. This means on a daily basis I get to use all the languages I know, and all the languages I only read bibliographically. It's a funny thing knowing a language. For librarianship you can go a long way in the language group, right? So that's a big part. But then also more and more collections and resources have to be used, and so I have to be out there with teaching and making sure people know what we have, because we have so many databases and so many journals and so many books, and it's a collection that needs to be used now, because we're not a national library that has things for the future, although we do some of that. But in general, I try to be really close to the departments that I work with so that I know what they need. In the past, people, the librarians would get, for German maybe, 5,000 slips and actually try to look through notifications on that scale. Today I find that some of those things are automated, and I work with vendors in Europe to talk about approval profiles and how what is being published in Senti needs to match what are the strengths in the departments. So I do that, but I often do development for courses. So if there's a new course, I have to sit down with the professor to see what is needed. And it's not all in one place, and sometimes it's hard to put together such lists. So collection development, teaching and outreach, and also teaching and working with undergraduates who do very sophisticated projects. And sometimes they will work with the faculty on the intellectual design, but they also need the materials, and they need to sort of figure out archival work and all that kind of stuff. And they're doing this where, maybe 20 years ago that would have been a master's, if it's an honors thesis. So I do a lot of that, and I work on the reference desk for people that walk in, but more interesting now is virtual reference, where you do chat, and so you have to really do it very, very quickly. Maybe I've chatted with some of you. Lastly, there's a lot of collaboration in librarianship, and increasingly, especially for area studies, we have regional, Northeast, Southeast, Midwest collaborations of libraries that are within driving distance, because we still have a lot of print and materials, so we don't collaborate in some of these things with people out on another coast. We have interlibrary loan for that, but when it comes to sort of collecting together, licensing together, I work on the regional and national level in organizations.
Thank you all. I'm going to start with Christian for this next question. How does having a PhD help you in your current line of work?
Good question. Several different ways. So I think most practically, what I'm doing is educational work for the most part. So having a connection to a discipline and to a particular literature comes up quite frequently. I'm able to access certain texts, or I've read things, and I can sort of say, you need to read this, or I'm able to connect what a student is asking me about to some larger intellectual context for them. I think more on the ground, having a PhD means that you have been able to pull off doing a large, complex, independent task, which is partially about figuring out how to pull something that's really complicated together. And so there's that kind of pragmatic component. It's also a lot about stamina and getting up every day and doing it, right, as you are in the process of figuring out. And I think that's a really great life skill. So those are probably the two biggest ways. Not stealing anybody else's answers.
Alan?
When talking to students like you can imagine when you were on the front end and you were applying to various graduate schools, and you said, what programs do you offer? What do you do? It's nice to be able to have the connection with students to say, you're interested in a PhD. Well, what are you interested in? Now, I have to be kind of a jack of all trades. I'm a social scientist by training, but you kind of get in, you kind of learn. As a PhD, I consider myself a lifelong learner. What it also says is it's not only can you pull off this particular project, but it also says that you are, I think would you agree that you're kind of a thinker, that you're a problem solver, you have, I tell students, a PhD is an expert degree, but I back away from that. And because sometimes you can be so esoteric, like I am, with my area, but it gives you this sort of focus where you can be esoteric, but I think also allows you critical thinking skills where you are able to be very broad, let me just put it like that. So I think that is the way that I have been able to use my degree. Also, in my line of work in dealing with faculty, it is nice, again, as my colleague has mentioned, to be tied to a discipline. Some folks are even more interdisciplinary, but it also gives you the connection to say, yes, I have been in the classroom, or yes, I've taught, yes, I've walked that walk, but I do something different now. But we have this commonality here, so we're not too different, but we do some different things that bring us both together.
So I didn't need the PhD for the first 8 years of my career, but then when I started this job, which is an area studies job, where you have to work with departments and in languages, that's when I really needed the PhD. When I started out, so I got my PhD. I helped with writing some books in German language, language instruction. I did translation and all those jobs that you know about. Then I did an internship in a library, but then the job I got after that, which I felt was using my research skills, was a grant administration job. And I picked a grant administration job in an area at UNC that I found interesting, which happened to be librarianship, lifelong learning, librarianship, Institute on Aging, librarianship, and I was on 4 grants, and I helped write one. And really, it was just amazing how the job description was just somebody with a BA, possibly somebody who does Excel and budget management and stuff like that. But I very quickly became part of the research team, and people who started with me, there was one other person that started with me, who stayed while I went on to another librarian job. She quickly became a co-principal investigator and sort of started getting traction and that way. So I thought that that first job as a grant administrator was a really good job, because you also had to get, there's a whole area of compliance work and grant administration work where universities have, they take people with talent or interest and give them courses. So you learn on the job. So I got a certificate in grant administration while I was at UNC. So that area, I thought, the PhD wasn't required, but it helped me succeed in this way of being a researcher. And then for this job, you will find, when you look at American universities, Western European studies as one example. I can't talk about other area studies, but Western European studies, between 30 and 60 universities will hire PhDs for these positions. And you have 3,500 universities, and many of them will have a librarian with an MLS, do English language and not so much foreign language. But these top schools really do hire PhDs for area studies. So in that scenario, I also needed a PhD.
Let's see. I think a PhD helps me in 3 ways. One is credential. The other is content, and the third is experience. So credential, it's just a fact of life that at a university, you're going to be taken more seriously if you have a PhD. If you want to try to interact with faculty, you want to ask them to do something that has intellectual content, you want to talk with them seriously about their work, you're more likely to get their attention if, as Alan said, if you can speak to them from where they are. I think another part of that they appreciate if you can develop these skills, if you decide to go in this direction, is to appreciate what faculty do. You know, it's not just asking them to appreciate you, but it's to understand, unlike what many people outside universities think, if you really are trying to understand where faculty are coming from, then you're not dismissing them as people who just work 3 hours a week and then go run around the wall on East Campus the rest of the time and hang out at the coffee shop. You know their lives have a different rhythm, but they work hard. And to approach faculty with respect is really, really important. I just can't emphasize that enough. That probably the thing that has irritated me the most in my various administrative jobs is dealing with other administrators who are dismissive of the faculty they work with. They don't want to work hard, they don't like engaging with students. That's not helpful and it's not true for most faculty. So I think that that's really important. Content-wise, as a cultural anthropologist, I think the things that I know from my research often come into play. The writing that you've done, that I've done as both for my PhD and after has been helpful. I've had a chance here at Duke to draw on my work in Madagascar and work with the Lemur Center to do a conference last year. So I have been able to use my particular content, and I have taught some, and I taught regularly when I was at Kenan. I don't have to in this current job, but I can if I want to. And experience-wise, I guess that just kind of goes into the, that's what I said at the beginning. So I think those are the main ways that I have mentioned.
I'm going to move on to the next question, and Alan, you're going to be up first. So what experiences and skills did you develop during graduate school that helped prepare you to be competitive for your current position? And if there are experiences or skills that you developed outside graduate school, but during that same period that you were in graduate school, if you could talk about those as well, that would be helpful.
Sure. Experiences and skills in graduate school. I just had a birthday, so you have to forgive me. So it's like I can plead Alzheimer's, I believe, bad, which is not really funny, but it's one of the things, thinking back to my days at Virginia in government and foreign affairs, is that we had a graduate student council, and it wasn't what you all have, which is the graduate professional student council, which we call GIPSY. It wasn't quite that expansive. It was really very focused, very departmental, but it was a group of folks in the department, myself and maybe 10 other people, who got together and talked about, our legacies. Well, who are the graduate students who are going to be coming after us? Should they be fighting for funding like we are? What should there be? When should we meet with the chair to discuss our issues? We haven't had a stable DGS for 2 semesters. So it was kind of being involved in a little bit of student activism. I guess I give it the broader category. So that was one of the experiences, and working with my peers in government and foreign affairs to say, these are common issues. I thought sometimes you can be in a graduate program, you can kind of live in isolation, and I beg you not to as much as possible, to become involved, to be fairly sociable, because I think those skills are important. Also, one of the things that I was able to do is that I sought friendships outside of my own academic areas. 2 things as I get older that I will tell you is that the world is a very small place, and I do believe in 6 degrees of separation. So the more people, even at Duke, that you meet, the more folks that you know, and not just in your departments, you'd be interested to find, people wind up in different places, but how people know other people and how things come together. So it was also branching out from my own comfort zone, getting to know folks in cell and molecular biology, just to say, well, gosh, what do you do? And sometimes, I got the intellectual interest to kind of read across fields once I started finding out, oh, I'm a political scientist, but now there's this budding field in political philosophy where people who kind of do psychology but call themselves political scientists then come and talk about these notions of like voting as a psychological process. So it's like, wow, these people, do the same, we're in the same discipline, but they do something totally different. So that's just, it's getting to move beyond your comfort zone, which is what I encourage you to do. And so that, I think those two experiences and developing those skills to kind of branch out are things that I would like to share for students in terms of what I think is pertinent to now.
Thank you, Alan.
So the first part, graduate school, obviously it made me a humanities scholar. It made me, at one point, fluent. I could go back and forth in French, English, and German very easily. Now it's more German and French. So obviously, when you spend time to get a PhD in languages, in the humanities, that's a great background to be in area studies librarian. I think what made me competitive is that I decided to get an MLS, a Master of Library Science, which is kind of the degree for librarianship. And a lot has changed there if you're interested in this, because librarianship has moved, there are 2 or 3 very good programs that are online programs. So that you don't have to commit to going to school for a year or 2 years. So I think that's what made me competitive, because everybody who gets a PhD is a library user, but libraries have another side to them. There's the whole technical services, there's cataloging, metadata, there's the tasks you do to keep everything in order. There's order processes, there's knowing organization of information outside of your particular field. So the fact that I had that on top of the subject librarian knowledge, I think made me competitive. And just a little side note, state universities will often require an MLS, where private universities will hire you with a PhD. So it's something to think about. It makes you more marketable generally. Lou?
So experiences during graduate school, it was content mostly, and I think the fact that I was at WashU at a time when the anthropology department was reaching out to other departments, so I was able to take courses in economics and political science, and courses team taught by faculty in different places that kind of prepared me for thinking interdisciplinarily for the rest of my career. And I think that's also what's made me competitive, is those opportunities while I was a graduate student and also while I was on the faculty and working at WashU, and continuing to work in those interdisciplinary programs and gain the administrative experience doing those things, whether it was running a graduate seminar that I had to deal with not just the graduate students in that seminar, but their faculty who were wondering about the value of an interdisciplinary graduate program, which I'm sure some of you might be dealing with that, some of your faculty here too. I think that those kind of things helped me. I was not an organizer as a graduate student or particularly involved in university governance. I thought that kind of stuff was boring. And in general, I still think university governance, it's not something that it's an intellectually interesting thing to me in some ways, but I'm very happy not to have to govern a university. Fair enough.
So my final 2 years of school were funded through a library internship, which you may have seen that was the competitive awards. And I actually think it's a really good opportunity for people who are interested in pursuing non-academic track jobs, because it's fun and it's really predictable work, so it makes it a little more interesting. For me, I needed dedicated times to write, because it takes me about a half hour to get deep enough in that I can write, and then another hour and a half have to get out. So having a predictable schedule was really helpful, and having practical work to do kind of made me realize that I could be really, really happy doing things other than writing. And so that was, in a lot of ways, the gateway to what I do now. The other thing I did in school, or while I was in school, was I got fairly involved in sort of local politics and neighborhood politics. And that connection was really useful, because one of the things I do in my current work is lead a group of students every fall doing things in Durham. So having some connections with leaders here was really helpful for personal contacts and network, but also for learning how to talk to really diverse groups of people. And so those are, I think, probably the two things.
Right, so we're back to starting with Heidi. Come full circle now. What additional skills have you needed to develop that we haven't already discussed since graduate school to bring you up to your current position? We had a very specific question about software skills that you might need in your current position.
That's a funny question. There's a simple answer and a more complicated answer. The simple answer, just for budget management, and this is actually interesting if you think of any kind of administrative work, that's a good question to ask, because each institution has some kind of a program, whether it's SAP for financial reconciling, or whether it's very fancy Excel sheets, or whether it's PeopleSoft. You know, sometimes there's jobs at a university that look really great, and then and you're the perfect person, and the one thing you don't have is PeopleSoft. You know, so that's a very good question. But there aren't. So for me, I learn a new system I almost want to say every week something comes up. So we have a content management system that's library specific. We've just moved everything to a new content management system. We have library guides. We work in Sakai. We work in WordPress. I just learned Omeka because somebody wants to do an exhibit. Every vendor, every European vendor has their own acquisitions database. And then, of course, we teach databases. So basically, when you're talking about tech skills, you know, it's a skill per job kind of, you know. So it's a whole variety. So you just have to sort of be willing to learn something new and forget about the touchstones that you know from the way something looked before. Does that answer that question?
Were there any skills other than the technical skills that you feel like you have needed to really develop?
Reading a license is big. Reading licenses. Ebook platforms is another technology that's hard. So in other words, I don't have that big skill. It's not one thing that I do. I just have to be willing to work with a whole range of systems.
She just brought up a whole lot of stuff like PeopleSoft and Apply Yourself and all this other stuff. We have this conversation all the time with you all. I say you all because I feel we're family. We're your graduate students. This is what we do. How many of you have been to the entrepreneurship workshop? Anybody in here? I recommend it. I do. If you're just thinking about entrepreneurship, Melissa does great. Do you do it? It's in the fall.
Probably every 2 years.
Probably every 2 years. See, I'm opening my mouth. So okay. Here's every 2 years. But if you are here, I do recommend it. And one of the questions that we get all the time is what. Oh, so I need to learn like PeopleSoft and Apply Yourself. So I need an MBA, right? No. No, you're in school, you got the PhD. I am, as my colleagues have told you, I think that's fine. You've earned the highest academic degree. You don't need much more, okay? Or to say that you need an MBA, you could just get degree after degree after degree. No. So these are on-the-job skills that you learn. One of the things, I look out at the audience and I just want to take a poll. You all are humanities and social sciences students, right? Is there any statistics, do you have to do stats or any form? I see shaking of heads. For those of you who aren't shaking your heads, okay. So for those of you that do not, if there is an opportunity for you to take basic stats or something, again, you don't need a PhD in statistics, but you need to have an understanding, I think, in order to sometimes, what I've had to do is I do more evaluation and analysis, and along with kind of understanding just how to analyze data, it's also that I'm able to be a little bit more proficient when we have to ask for queries from our colleagues to be specific about what kinds of things you want. And the skills that I credit to my being able to do that, or just having this base knowledge of quantitative analysis, okay? So I don't want to say to the others that shook your head and say, no, I don't have it, to say, oh, you got to go get it tomorrow. But it may be one of those skills that you want to develop, because I do, for me, that has been important. For the role as an assistant dean, when you have to evaluate data and you having to run queries, and you're having to talk back and forth to people in the SIS office, in the Student Information's office, that has been helpful in terms of getting to the next step, and for me being proficient enough to communicate effectively with our colleagues. But I think that's the most polished I've been this afternoon.
I'm going to just jump in here really fast and say I'm a humanities PhD myself. I'm an English PhD. And one of the things that's happened over the course of my administrative career is that the research projects that I'm involved in now are social sciences methodology research projects. So I've really left the kind of humanities methodologies behind, and I have needed to learn some social science research skills, which is fun, because a PhD prepares you for critical thinking, it prepares you to learn on the job, and humanities PhDs can do that. You can learn enough from working with your colleagues to do that. So it is good to try to get those experiences, or look for those experiences if you're interested in these kind of academic administration careers.
Right, and Melissa is, speaking of on-the-job training, we have to do our own P-card receipts, our procurement card receipts, and she's like, well, Alan, I don't want to do I do the eye roll, because I'm like, you have a PhD, you're smart enough, you can do this, I can teach you this.
That's the thing that gets put off. Until they're telling you they're going to turn your key card off.
Right.
We can all do them.
You can do this.
It's not difficult. It's
It's
just
not difficult.
mind-numbing. Just yeah. Okay, Christian. Sorry to take us off.
So that little inside joke we just had about the Kenan, or about the procurement card, which is how most student pays for stuff. It's a good. So every job that I can imagine in kind of academic administration is going to have some sort of software environment that you have to interface with, and that's just kind of reality. And whether you're able to program SAS or not, I think it's a perk if you can, because then you can program SAS, you can do anything else that's going to come along. But even if you can't, yeah, this is not PhD work. Learning software is not PhD work. It's easier than that, so it's okay. In my own work, Lou's been chuckling over here because so I did a little bit of XML encoding, HTML encoding while I was working as an archivist. Now I basically built our website, which is WordPress based. I'm really, really good at graphic design work, which is also something that I didn't know when I started. So I do a lot of work in Adobe, Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, the usual works or Office type programs, and a few of the kind of specialized SAP kinds of things. But it's all stuff I picked up. It's not anything I had a significant background in prior to starting. It's just kind of. I think having a PhD is useful in the sense that you are used to creating something out of that wasn't there previously, which is different. It's a very, very different mindset. And so looking at the program that I now run, which I've essentially built, and kind of going, okay, well, what are the pieces that I think should be here that aren't here? How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to do it because I'm the person who can. That's kind of how I ended up doing it the way I do. So.
Christian is, by the way, an excellent graphic designer. Although I don't think it's in his job description to do all of the graphic design that he does, which is one of the skills that you need to learn is flexibility. And if you don't have it, get it. and that's actually not something academics are known for. So I think that being able to go with the flow, to respond, to pick up whatever you need to pick up, get it done with cheer, a sense of humor is an excellent thing to have. Kindness and humility are really important qualities to cultivate in yourselves, and they will inspire them in others. Honesty is always important, and learning how to collaborate with people. I would say, for all the technical skills, just to repeat what's already been said, pretty much anything that we told you today, we have to use on a day-to-day basis, or we think is absolutely essential. By the time you finish, even if you're going to finish next year, it's going to be something different. So do what you need to do so that you are prepared to take on whatever needs to be done, but don't invest a whole lot of time in a particular type of technical ability unless it's something that you really, really, really want to master. But learning how to collaborate with people, again, for most PhD projects, you've been loners. My project was pretty much of a loner project out in the middle of nowhere for much of the time. I had research assistants and things like that. Then you write by yourself. Maybe you have a writing group, but a lot of that work is by yourself. So learning how to work in teams and respond to others and share blame, share responsibilities. The fun of that, that's probably been the most pleasurable thing to me about the shift from the faculty to this kind of work, is just the joy of being constantly in teams and bouncing ideas off people and then working together to get something done. And I know in the sciences and more in some of the social sciences, that's becoming the norm. But this kind of work absolutely requires it. You don't really have an option to be the loner in your office. And so that's something to be thinking about, in terms of what your preferences are as you think about jobs. I can't think of a job at the university on the administrative side that doesn't require a lot of people time and listening to what other people have to say.
Thank you. So I want to take a quick poll of our panel. How many of you just applied for a job that you found from the Duke HR website, just applied online, cold, without any contacts or networking, and successfully got it? Okay, great. So 25% of our panel was able to land their current position that way, or a position that way. Great. So for the folks in the room, how did you find opportunities that are not faculty positions in the university? Where do you hear about these kinds of jobs? And how do you draw on your network to help you navigate them? I'll start with Christian this time, just to shake it up.
So I kind of lucked out in that my advisor was moving into a more administrative role herself, and was doing a lot of that kind of large-scale department or university service, and so she knew a lot of people who knew about a lot of opportunities, and so that was really, really useful. So if you look at your committee and the person who is least walled off in their office and onto those committees, those are the people I would talk to. I do think that just having seen a lot of applications for administrative jobs come through my office, and they're relatively competitive. But having said that, I do think that we've certainly hired people just who applied cold through the HR website. And I think if you're interested in staying at Duke, you have an advantage for a lot of jobs because you know the systems pretty well here, and so you'll be able to pick it up a little quicker. It'll be more shifting your mindset than shifting your skill set.
Remember when I told you about your network and expanding your network? Well, I decided when I was in Carolina that to branch out and make sure that I connected with my peers who were in similar positions at what I consider our sister institutions. So you got North Carolina State and you had Duke. Well, so I considered, by hook or crook, the young woman who was in the position that I currently have now says, oh, by the way, I'm leaving. Oh, where are you going? And is that true? And so by that, you can kind of follow the logic. And it also happened to be timing. Sometimes timing is right. It was during, it was 2009 I was hired. So we were coming off of the recession. So you kind of, it's how you market yourself too. And sometimes you'll have to ask your mentors and advisors how to market yourself. But I happen to be, this is not the time to bring someone from Ohio, even though I'm sure there were well-qualified candidates in Ohio, but that's costly. You got someone right across the street who's been doing the same job. Why not take a look at him? Again, not essentially how it's framed, but literally when you take pen to paper to kind of write your what you bring to the table, the kinds of things that you've been doing, matching. You still have to do kind of the things where you have to your vita. I had to literally take my academic resume and tweak it to answer the job that I was applying to, okay? The cover letter also had to speak to certain things that I knew that and I talk in generalities because I think this is helpful to you, that we know was due, but what was the present employer kind of looking for, okay? What skills were going to essentially have the person who really wanted the position, what do you bring to the table, etc. So, so that again, so networking, and just by having, a conversation at lunch with someone and say, oh, by the way, and of course you'll hear things, oh, so-and-so is leaving. And it's not that you use those opportunities to harm, but just by having some knowledge, you want to follow through and say, is that exactly true? Is the position posted? Once it gets posted, then you want to apply. But again, I would encourage you to make sure that your credentials, because you're all bright young people, but the resume or the vita kind of speak to the job description, and that your cover letter speaks to the job description, and also find out, and you can just do this by a telephone call or knowing people, who's the hiring manager, so you can address letters to specific people. And that sometimes when people see that you have taken the extra step or steps to kind of find out things, that's helpful. Also, when you interview, let me give you a tidbit to kind of know a bit about the folks that are trying to hire you. Look them up, see what they do. You can, 9 times out of 10, you can find things on the internet. Just like, what does this person do? What's the description that they give? So you know a little bit about them. And when you meet them, you say, oh yeah, what do you, in terms of, you have questions for them and that. It catches me off guard when people actually take the time to get to know me. Because I'm like, I'm just a black kid, off the block from Atlanta. I said, if you've really taken the time to really, I think someone who's less than, it does strike a chord with me. So sometimes that gives you, tips for giving you the leg up, So, and that's how I got here by hook or crook. Heidi?
There's something funny about librarians. They like to share. Librarians share information. How new is that? So, I would say, and there are a lot of opportunities where it's sort of lower level jobs, but just working in the library, you hear a lot. And that is one way that you find out about opportunities. In general, of course, libraries hire somebody with an MLS, but they also hire special skills. And so, so keeping your ear out for those special skill jobs, whether it's a language, whether it's technical knowledge, like at the Center for Instructional Technology, whether it's, let's see, rare books cataloging, digital humanities projects. Not all of those need an MLS, so keeping your ear open for those. And within the library, you would hear about them because, you know, we're very talkative. But I would say something you need to understand, any field that you want to go into, ask yourself, what conference do they go to? And so, for example, if you're interested in librarianship, I would say, so American Library Association is the big conference, but within that, there's the Association of College and Research Libraries, which also has sections. So, for example, for me, I would be looking at Western European Studies, which is a section of Association of College and Research Libraries, which is an association of ALA, and that is where I meet. Then you will find the listservs. Jobs always come across listservs, and you will also understand where job listings might be. Libraries are so specialized. Each library has its own job listing, and it goes into that HR part, but it gets handled a little different from others. So I guess that two pieces of advice. Bottom up, get a job in the library, and top down, understand where the conference is.
So Lou, you were the one person who had an experience of just applying cold through the online system and getting the job. Can you tell us a little bit about
the
that?
Kenan job actually happened that way. I was too stupid to know that that's not the way it usually happens. So I just applied, and somebody did send me, but nobody who was affiliated with Kenan, just somebody who knew I was looking to move within Duke, let me know that there were a couple of jobs open in Kenan at that time, and I put in my application and got an interview and went through the whole process. So I don't really know any more about it than that, except that, I think the initial how you find out about the job is still, the question, and I think that's what I've been trying to puzzle through that a little bit, because I think that is a challenge for these types of jobs. How they're going to be advertised, where you're going to find them is a little bit harder. It's not like, like the Anthropology Association has its job listing and the Political Science Association, but they tend to focus on academic jobs within those disciplines. And so you kind of, once I knew I was at Duke and I knew I wanted to stay at Duke, I was also looking at UNC, but this came up. And so having somebody who knew I was looking, so letting people know that you're looking and what type of thing you'd be interested in doing is a really good idea. I think when I think about my job now also as a mentor to people from my home department where I got my PhD, so we have a Facebook group of WashU anthropology people, and some of them are current graduate students, some of them are graduates like me. And we share a lot of information in that group, so when the Duke Assistant Dean job comes up or something else, I'll shoot it out there and just, anybody who's looking for an alternative to the tenure track, or if you want to be moving to North Carolina for some other reason and there's not a tenure track job in your field, then take a look at that. So I think those kinds of opportunities, trying to, so I'm thinking where you guys are right now, thinking about the people who graduated from your departments and building some relationships with them, or making sure you maintain relationships with them, because they're going to be at other, if they did go to universities in whatever type of capacity, they're going to have that inside information about where they are, and that's really helpful to keep those networks open, because they can share information about possibilities that come up.
Thank you. The next question I'm just going to ask if anybody has any expertise to share. We did have a question that came through asking about academic administration kinds of positions. Are they available in universities beyond the U.S., or are they most common in your experience in the United States?
For librarianship, it's hard to get into a job in Germany or France, because it's you have to have a different degree. So That would be a switch over that would be hard to make.
I never see it discussed in a little bit of online, talking about these sorts of jobs. That particular question doesn't seem to come up much. And I don't know anyone who's gotten a job like that.
One of the things that I'm going to do, Melissa, hopefully, is maybe I'll have an answer for you, and if I get, I'm going to apply for a Fulbright. We're into a swap in terms of these positions, and to see, it's like to say, well, could someone like me go, what are you looking for? But like I said, I don't know, just like the panel, so it's an entree to that would be something like a Fulbright.
I would say if Canada counts, then yes.
It's true, but
Meaning our
Otherwise,
most
I'm not-
northern state.
Yes.
There's also a question, is it difficult for international PhDs to get a non-faculty job in a university setting? Does anybody have any experiences to shed light on that?
Yeah, I could tell you that the language skills that you need and the cultural background, it helps you. I would assume this is someone who needs a visa, right? And that happens a lot in librarianship. So there, it's even being asked.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be a barrier at all.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna combine the next couple of questions, and I'll just let people volunteer. Are these jobs stable? Are there more of these jobs or fewer of these jobs than faculty positions? And how does the pay, the salary compare with tenure track faculty positions? And I'll let anybody comment who feels compelled to.
I think librarianship is a special case because there are several systems in the United States where librarians actually have tenure and are considered faculty. Duke has a sort of an in-between system where we are staff, but we get the equivalent of tenure. UNC has I think 5-year contracts. They're permanent, but it's reviewed every 5 years. But I've never heard, even during the last crisis, nobody lost their job, even though they were technically on term contracts. And in terms of salary, I think even that surprises people, even if you come in as a PhD. The PhD, in many cases, sometimes it may, but in many cases, entry level, it doesn't give you extra. You don't get 5,000 extra because you have a PhD compared to the person who doesn't. Eventually, it will pay off, but.
well, there might be 4 lines for an assistant professorship. There's probably 1 or 2 lines. So the assistant dean track or the dean's track, rightfully so, may not produce as many jobs in one area. So you'll have to look across country. If you're looking specifically for an assistant dean's position, then you look across country. There are these 2 positions, maybe 3 in the Duke Graduate School, maybe a few in the undergraduate area. So you'd have to figure out where, number 1, where you wanted to land. And the other part of that was,
Are they stable? How many are there? And how does salary compare?
And another thing about salary, I'll just always do your homework. I've talked to people who do negotiation, and that's kind of touch and go. Even when I applied for this job, I understood what an assistant professor comparably at Harvard would make, and I knew better than to ask for that. I was like, no. First of all, it's Cambridge, and if I were living in Cambridge, or if I were living in New York and had to be in Manhattan, yeah, I would have to command a bigger salary just to live. So I said, this is Durham. Look at, and kind of look at various institutions. And what I based it on was it's about on par with about the low end. Cut the tape off now. The low end what I would consider a good salary for an average starting salary for an assistant professor. Some of them, I've had peers to make more, but they've been at U Chicago, and of course, if I were at the University of Chicago, I couldn't make what I make now. You'd have to command more. And so, again, cost of living, markets, do your homework to see what average salaries look like, and from there, negotiate. And then, of course, do they offer things like, for Duke, what does your retirement look like? As they will tell you in negotiating, it's not always sometimes about the dollar amount. It's, gosh, if I had kids, Duke has this nice, we call them the golden handcuffs, where, what is it that they pay a percentage of, a percentage of of your kids' college tuition, whether they're in Duke or any other institution, which is kind of a nice deal in this day and age. In fact, I might adopt a few kids and a few dogs just to get the benefit. But just things like that, look out for.
And I think in terms of pay, just that kind of as a reminder, that what's not comparable for most of these positions, not for all, but you're not going to, they're usually going to be 12-month, not 9 months, so you don't have the opportunity for supplementing your pay by getting a grant, getting, summer salary or something like that, which faculty can do. So that's not, it's not comparable. You're not going to get a big cushy research account. You might get some research funds, but get anything in writing, while we're doing general stuff, get it in writing. Anything that somebody won't put in writing, there's a reason they won't. And it's either because they're not sure they can come through with it, or they never have any intention of coming through with it. And so, just be alert for that. And research accounts in particular for staff positions can be a little tricky. So I would say if somebody promises you one, find out what the terms of that are. Because it is possible to get those as staff, but it's not, it's usually not quite as flexible as what faculty get for research positions or research funds.
So are there relatively more or fewer? I mean, I think that depends largely on how broad you're willing to go. I mean, my recollection from being on the academic job market was that you essentially had, you have your discipline and then you have your specialty within that discipline, and so it's really a pretty small cross-section of jobs that you're looking on an annual basis. And the admin jobs tend to be much, much more broad than that. And so if you think about it that way, there are quite a few more of them. So that's probably good news. Pay, I think, is, the low end of assistant professor range is probably a good way of thinking about it. My own experience, just as a human who likes to do things like not grade papers, and who has a child now and enjoys seeing my child, there's a lot to recommend the lifestyle. I'm certainly not a 9-to-5 employee. I don't clock out. After this, I'm going to go back and have we're opening an exhibit at Kenan that I spend most of the day hanging or fiddling with. But yeah, the rhythm of it is 12 months, but it's demanding in different ways, and it's a little easier to limit and shape your life in a way that is, for me now, a much better work-life balance than I think I would have had as an assistant professor, particularly at a small liberal arts college someplace where you're supposed to be everything.
I will comment too about the salary piece. In terms of doing your homework, the UNC system salaries are public information in the state of North Carolina. So if you haven't looked at those before, that's a good place to start if you want to look at what an administrative 12-month position might pay compared with an assistant professor position. Duke's salaries bear no relationship with the UNC system information, and they are private information, so you will not find those. But that's a place that you can start to make some comparisons. All right, well, I promised that we would wrap up at 4:45 so that folks could ask some individual questions at the end. Please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their experiences today. Thank you all so much for coming. You'll receive an evaluation through your email if you take a few moments to fill that out. Thanks so much.